Welcome to our very first edition of Nimdia Talk, a platform for exchange of ideas, capacity building, and community. Our focus is on the African intelligentsia in the diaspora. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend for our very first conversation, and I would like her to introduce herself. Hello, friend, how are you? Would you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Albert. Hi, everybody. Good to talk to you, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Phyllis, Phyllis Chimenza, that's my full name, and I am currently a student, a doctoral student at Miami University in Ohio.
Oh, thank you, fellas. We are happy that you could join us today. We are really, really excited to have you for our very first conversation. One of the questions I've had like so many questions from people, from prospective grad students in Ghana, in other parts of the world, who are really curious about the whole graduate school experience. I'm just wondering, are you in grad school? I think you mentioned a little bit of that. Can you talk to us about which program you are in and what your field of study is?
Sure. I'm also excited to be on the show. As I said before, I'm a doctoral student, so graduate school, and I am studying educational leadership. I'm currently in my third year working on my research proposal now. Um, Graduate school has been, it's interesting, especially since I'm doing it in another country that is not my country. So it has benefits and it has challenges too, like everywhere else. So I would say, on the whole, graduate school has been um, educative and mind opening for me. And there's so many things I have learned now that I probably wouldn't have been able to learn if it wasn't for graduate school in a different country. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And I share kind of a similar sentiment, in the sense that although it feels like a very long time, but I finished my PhD at the U of Alberta in 2017, and the graduate experience that I had
Mm-hmm.
perhaps similar to yours in the sense that you learn a lot. It's obviously challenging, and
Mm-hmm.
you learn quite a bit. Can you talk to us, Phyllis, about your academic journey? How did you start? Where did you go
Uh,
to school in Ghana? How did you decide to pursue grad school, and what influenced your choice of schools? Can you just sort of give us a little overview of your whole academic journey? I know it's a mouthful, but can you give us a little bit of a taste of that? How did that start for you, your academic journey?
sure. Would you want the long story or the short story? The one that starts from nursery, KG.
Maybe you spare us that, but yeah, maybe from high school, that sort of,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I am from Ghana. I'm Ghanaian, born and bred in Ghana. I did my high school in Kumasi, um, the second biggest city in Ghana. My high school was called Yasanto. It was a boarding school, so everybody who went to school in Ghana and went to the boarding house knows how it is. It's crazy. Um, it's a transition period that is full of ups and downs. There are times that you kind of want to die, especially when you are starting, but it's a good experience. And then I went from there, I went to college, as Americans would call it. We would say university at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. There I studied political science major and then English as a minor. And then from there, again for the Ghanaians here, national service. So I was a teaching assistant at KN University for a year. And then I moved on to graduate school in England for a year before I ended up in the US for another graduate school. So I would say my life has been just moving from one school to the other, mostly.
Interesting. Phyllis, so what program did you study at university in Ghana? What program did you study at the university you went to in England? And what program are you in now? Was it sort of a logical sequence, or you kind of did bits and pieces here and there? Can you talk to us about your choice of program and what influenced that choice?
Sure. So in Ghana, I did political science, as I said before. Actually, we call it political studies. That's the department. So that's what I did for undergrad. And then in the UK, in England, I studied African studies. And then,
What university did you attend in England, Phyllis?
sorry, University of Oxford, or Oxford University. Either
Okay.
way. Yes. I was in the African Studies program. It was a 1 year program. I'll probably say like 9 months. It was fun, a lot of fun, but it was also trying times for me. And then in the US, I was in another master's program that was political science. That was another 1 year program. And then I worked for a year and then returned to school for the PhD in educational leadership. So I've been all over the place in different academic disciplines.
Very interesting. My experience is a little different in the sense that I was thrown into the agricultural science degree in Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
They told us that agriculture is all about work.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of credits in Ghana, and then I moved to Saskatchewan to do my master's
Mm-hmm.
in the same field, and then to the U of Alberta in Canada to do a PhD. So mine was a little bit more linear, but it was lots of fun. And in terms of Phyllis, in terms of your whole graduate school experience, what would you say was the best adjustment that you had to make coming from Ghana, um, going to doing your undergrad at KNUST in political science, and then sort of transitioning to Oxford, and then later moving to Ohio? What was the biggest adjustment in your view that you had to make?
Is it specifically academic or in general?
You could make it general and then perhaps focus specifically on the academic.
Okay. So in general, I would say obviously the weather in England, the sun hardly comes out. So um, it's a little depressing, like when you're moving from Ghana, which is mostly sunny, to weather to a place that is like maybe 7 or 8 months out of the year, very cold, very cloudy, rainy. So
Mhm.
it was a major adjustment for me, the weather. And then I'll say the culture, and culture, I would say um, smoking. I was not used to too many people smoking around me, but in England, that was the first thing I noticed about the place. People smoke in the open a lot, doesn't matter. So it was hard for me to adjust to that. Academic wise, I think well, I think thanks to colonialism, I think we have like a similar academic system in
Okay.
England. So it's usually in the beginning of the semester, everything is pushed to the final exam at the end of the year, in my case. I mean, we did an exam in between, halfway in the program, but it didn't count. So the major exam was done at the end of the year. But besides that, everything else is mostly seminar based. You go to seminars, researchers would come and present, or professors would, it was like a lecture style. So they would come, talk for maybe an hour at most, a few questions, and the rest of it we have seminars during the week where we break up into smaller groups and then we present on specific topics, right? And then you don't have to write any exam until the end of the year. But in the US, it's very different, extremely different, I would say. from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester, you are always doing something. You're doing homework, you're doing writing papers, you're doing assignments, you have to contribute in class, everything counts. So that was also a very different experience for me. So I would say what helped me to adjust, the transition between Ghana and the UK wasn't that much, except for just trying to understand the system and how it works. But in the US, it was more like a lot of reading. You have to, there is no time to be like, oh, I would sleep on this, and then at the end of the semester, I would kind of cram everything. You have to be on top of your work from A to Z. So in Ghana, in my final year, I had this professor who introduced us to that kind of teaching style, I would say. I mean, it wasn't as intense as the American one, but we read a lot. We read more than we were used to reading. We did presentations and stuff. So in a way, that kind of prepared me for the US system, I would say, if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Very interesting. And I think for me the natural question that comes up then is, you've done your master's in the UK, Oxford University of all places, the creme de la creme, if I could say that. Why did you decide to drink from what I call the poison chalice? Why did you decide to do a PhD? Because I think the decision to do a PhD is a very, very big decision. Why did you decide to get more education? What influenced that decision?
That's an interesting. I mean, I didn't. Okay, so I didn't start from, oh, I want to do a PhD straight away, right? After school, I was like, okay, let me do a master's and then find a job, right? But then I got interested in research in general. I guess I got more curious, wanting to read more, feeling like I don't know enough and I should know more than I need to know about something. At the time, I wasn't even interested in I wasn't interested in education. I always said I don't want to be a teacher, da, da, da. But studying, African politics and how the continent is and everything, it all came down to one thing: the kind of education we are receiving. So that got me interested in the field of education and wanting to learn more, pursue more knowledge in the field of education to give back to the continent. So that got me interested in wanting to do further studies or a PhD, because it gives you much time to research. Master's program is usually, especially for the ones I did, each of them was 1 year. So we didn't have much time to do as much research. I mean, at Oxford, I had to go do fieldwork and come back and write a paper, but it was all done in 9 months. And then in the US, I also did a thesis, but it's not the same as spending 3-4 years studying something. So that is the experience I wanted, to get more time to study and research. Yeah.
So that's and I think that's a very good perspective, because the duration of the PhD, although it's a few years of your life that you never get back, but it gives you that space to think, that space to marinate over those issues and develop those deeper questions that provide the basis for an entire research program, if I could put it that way. Phyllis, what's your research? What are you? I know you mentioned that you are doing some research in educational leadership. What type of research is it? What question are you focused on? Would you want to share that with your audience, with our audience?
Okay, so
I know
just
you really like to talk about that.
I mean, I would just briefly talk about it because I just finished my coursework. So, well, those of you who do not know, doing a PhD is kind of different from in the US is different from in the UK. In the UK, you have to, when you're applying, you find someone you want to work with, and then the moment you start, you are going into your research straight up. In the US, you do coursework, like more like you are doing a different program altogether. So you take classes, you do exams just like any student would, and then after say 2 years, that's when you start. By that time, you would have read enough to be able to figure out what question you want to focus on. So I just finished with my coursework, and I just figured out my research question, but I do know the area I want to research on, and my interest is in indigenous knowledges. Just reading all over the place, I found out that in our schools in Ghana, and I'm probably sure it's in many other countries in Africa too, our educational system is very Eurocentric. Most of the things we learn are based on standards set for us by international organizations and Western countries. And in doing that, we have forgotten about our own educational systems. We have forgotten about the knowledge that exists in our indigenous, like our proverbs, our songs, our everyday people on the streets. So that's the kind of thing I'm interested in pursuing. How can we incorporate those indigenous knowledge systems in our education system? So we have people, or we have students who are learning to improve their environment, who are learning based on what they know about their culture, about their history. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good summary of it.
I think so. Thanks for
it,
sharing. And
it will become
when,
clear in a few years.
yeah, when you were talking about your PhD and all the different transitions that you have made over the course of the last few years, it just occurred to me that most of us have interesting stories that had to do with something we saw, something we had to adjust to, something that we always look back and laugh. And I'm sure, in the spirit of the moment, my audience would like to know whether you encountered anything. Was it maybe a cultural shock, funny incident that you want to share with us? So is there anything that you want to share in relation to some of the interesting adjustments that you have made, or any interesting stories?
Um, sure. I just remembered, so on the very first day I went to Oxford, we call it colleges over there. So your hall of residence is also your college. It's confusing, but when I got there, I needed to buy call credits to call my parents. So I asked somebody if there was any shop around, and then the person pointed me in a direction that, oh, you just have to go to this place, and it's not far, maybe 5-10 minutes ish. So I had never used Google Map, so I decided to use Google Map to take me to this place, and I ended up walking for an hour, just kept looking for it. I walked and walked and walked, like until I saw some woman. I was like, there is supposed to be a shop somewhere around. And she's like, oh, I'm actually going there. I'll take you there. And I had gone past the place, so she had to take me all the way back to, to the shop to buy.
Very interesting. Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I mean, if I want to recount my stories, I think it will take a whole duration of conversation. But one that comes to mind is the one that once I when I relocated to Canada the first time. It's cold. I was in Saskatchewan. I don't know whether you've heard of Saskatchewan.
I've
It's in
heard of
Western Canada.
it.
It is cold. Like the name even sounds cold, right? And I was in a small city called Saskatoon, where
Mhm.
nothing much happens. There is just flat land. And unfortunately, the year that I went to Canada was one of the coldest years. So it was really, really cold.
Mhm.
And so my colleagues who were Canadians were even complaining. My profs were complaining. And so I complained bitterly. And one of my profs said that the secret to dealing with the Saskatchewan cold is to dress up until you don't feel cold anymore. So like if you wear one shirt and you come out and you feel cold, just put on an extra layer. So multi-layer yourself until you feel warm enough. Anyways, I took the advice maybe too seriously. I showed up for class the next day looking like a huge ball because I had layered myself. I think I've overly layered myself to the extent that the prof who advised me was poking jokes at me, saying that is Albert here today? Although he saw me there, he said I had put on a few extra pounds over the last 24 hours. But that was a very interesting experience. It was. And you can never prepare for that. You just have to live it.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, but I always remember Saskatoon with fondness. I have a cold spot in my heart for Saskatoon, and I say that very fondly.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Cold. Uh,
it was very, very cold. Just to wrap this up, as somebody with your experience, as somebody who I think the unique perspectives that you bring are very important because I think that you have had the opportunity to experience different educational systems.
mhm.
And I know a lot of our listeners, at least I have had a couple of people, quite a few people, reach out to me with general questions about education in North America, education in the UK. Um, what skills, so just thinking about it, sort of reflecting over your experiences, what skills did you acquire during the course of your own education that looking back you think has served you well? Would you do any set of skills come in mind that you would want to share with our audience?
Mm, I think in general, um, being reading,
Okay.
I liked to read in Ghana, so it wasn't too difficult for me
Okay.
to read a lot more than I'm used to reading. So I would say, because in Ghana we don't, especially in the college level, we don't necessarily read as much. But over here, reading, and I would also say, we didn't do much of writing that I had to learn here. So if you are in Ghana or anywhere else and you want to do graduate school, you should learn to read.
Mm.
You don't have to enjoy it, but it's part of it. You just have to read to survive. And I would also say just be open-minded to learn new things, especially in the US. It's more of you have to speak up in class. You shouldn't be afraid to share your views. That's how Americans are trained. That's how the system is. So just not being afraid to express your thoughts. Most people are very encouraging. So just being open and not feeling like you don't know, so you don't want to say something or you feel like people will judge you. Just say what's on your mind. The professors will encourage you. Just be willing to learn new things, be willing to learn from people who are different from you, and be willing to teach people who don't know much about you, because you would have to do that a lot.
Right.
In a different country. Even your name can be You'd have to mention your name to people multiple times before they learn how to say it. But yeah, so those are the kind of things you have to adjust to. Yeah, people asking you questions about your culture and your people, and sometimes people being just being annoying, but just learning how to deal with that.
Right. Thank you. That's a very interesting perspective. I normally people would ask me to pronounce my last name, and I've been doing that for a while. After a while, I got tired. So
Yes.
whenever you ask me that, I will ask you to pronounce it based on how you see it, and then whatever pronunciation you come up with, I would say 10 out of 10. That's amazing. It saves
Yeah.
me the trouble, but those are always very, very interesting conversations. Just a final wrap up, Phyllis. Would you encourage, like based on your own experience, again, most of our audience really are people who are perhaps prospective grad students.
Yeah.
Was looking back, was the experience worth it? Would you encourage a young African in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, who is thinking about getting more education, going to grad school? Would you encourage them to take that step outside their continent if they have the opportunity? Was your experience a good one for you personally?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question. I would say absolutely. If you get the opportunity, definitely come pursue it. Yeah. And then also, yes, come pursue it, but also not to think that it's easy.
Right.
There are many challenges. It's not like we sit in Ghana or Nigeria and think like, oh, America or the UK, like it's an easy life. It's not easy. So just come in with the mindset that you will succeed, but you have to work hard for it. Yeah, and just learn and be willing to give back to wherever you're from, one way or the other. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And I think I agree in essence with with most of the comment, particularly the ones that you have made regarding students taking opportunity. I agree wholly with you on that. I strongly believe that the new currency for the new Africa is knowledge, and I think that if we develop our capacity enough, we actually will be in a better position to lead the new Africa. And I'm really happy and excited that so many of us young Africans have acquired skills in sort of a diversity of areas
Yeah.
that are crucial for the development of Africa. And I think, in my opinion, on that score, the future looks bright.
Yes.
I think perhaps the challenge is how we recycle that knowledge back into the system.
Yes. That's
Right,
for
Phyllis?
another day.
Yeah, and I'm sure that will be a conversation for another day. But thank you so much for joining us today.
So,
It's
thank you
really
for
been a very exciting time chatting with you, and you have written your name in gold by being the first guest on this program.
I'm honored.
And I'm sure that this will not be the last time we'll see you again.
Okay. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your time.
Thank you too.